How can the youth change our cities for the better? Hi, my name is Marcin Wojciech-Żebrowski and welcome to the newest episode of the Urbcast at Act Now series. Welcome to the third episode of the Urbcast at Act Now, a series which is recorded during the Act Now Mayors Conference 2022, organized by the Innovation in Politics Institute, that Urbcast was the media partner of, and I managed to record a couple of interesting conversations during those 2 days I've spent in Stuttgart, in Germany. And today I will be talking to Urban Standberg, or Urban Standby, knowing that I used to live in Sweden and I know some Swedish. I think that's the proper way of pronouncing Urban's surname. Urban is the managing director and co-founder of International Youth Think Tank, which is think tank in which youth take the lead for empowerment and democracy for innovation. And in this episode, we'll talk about how the youth can change our cities, for the better, of course. We will also discuss what is the story behind the International Youth Think Tank, how in the midst of the crisis the youth can actually take the lead and change the world, and how can they keep the motivation knowing that so many bad things are happening in the world, and also what is Urban's advice to young future leaders who would like to make an impact, and how the youngsters can be involved in IYTT, the International Youth Think Tank. So welcome to the newest episode. Urban, thank you very much for being the part of the podcast. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
So thank you very much for having me here. Well, because this is a hugely interesting conference and to get the chance of talking to you, well, the conference gets even better. So thank you.
Let's start by talking about the youth think tank that you created some time ago. I'm really curious about what is the background behind it. Why did you create it and why do you direct especially the youth?
Well, democracy has two major challenges, and I would say that goes for Europe and the globe overall. And one of the problems is that the authoritarian ideas and the authoritarian regimes are gaining ground. They are all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but they are very kind of successful, and many people seem to be attracted by them. And we need to counter the strength of those ideas with the strength of the ideas for a democratic and open society. So that is the first reason to organize this youth think tank. The second reason is that there are so many people in established democracies, but also in less democratized part of the world, who doesn't feel as if they really are called upon as citizens. They don't feel as if they matter. They don't feel as if their voice is listened to by whoever. So they need to be emancipated and empowered as political subjects, which is the same thing as saying they must be active citizens. So for both those causes, democracy need to be improved. So then is the matter, how would you go about that? You know, I'm a political scientist by training, and I have been seeing so many examples taken by policymakers, be it politicians or others, of improving democracy. And I'm sorry to say, but many of those examples they are not good enough. They are not innovative enough, they are not visionary enough, and they are not really for real. So what to do? Well, we know both from statistics and from thick knowledge and from our kind of intuitive way of being humans, that young people, they are much more visionary, innovative, and future-oriented and optimistic. So the idea of the IYTT is to make good use of the young people's visionary, innovative, optimistic, future-oriented capacities and ask them to do the analysis of democratic problems with the authoritarian ideas and with the empowerment needs for citizens. Because if they do it, I'm convinced that they will come up with much more productive, fruitful proposals on democracy improvement and empowerment. So I think they could be the experts. So in brief, we call upon the youth, not because we want to make their lives better as youth. And we don't call upon them to ask them to come up with ideas for other youth. We call upon them because we think that they could be experts for society at large because of the unique capacities that they have as young people. So, very brief, democracy could be saved if we entrust the youth as our experts.
Beautiful. And I like the part in which you mentioned that the young people, the youth, they are optimists. And I would like to develop this thread because we already heard during this conference, the Act Now Mayors Conference, that there are some problems and challenges that have to be faced by the youth. Because it's not only about the climate change, it's not only about the distant learning and young people being closed in their homes for almost 2 years right now. It's not only about the war in Ukraine right now, which is hugely affecting, of course, especially the young Ukrainians, the youngsters, the youth. So how in the midst of all what's happening in the world, the young people can still have the hope and stay optimists to be able to innovate and fight for the future for themselves and not only?
Let me first say, because we have the core activity of the IYTT is the annual youth conference. And so 200 roughly people in the age span of 18 to 24 have applied, and they come from 40 countries. And we select 24 of them, and they come to a conference, and we ask them, now you have 4 days, please come up with very tangible democracy promoting proposals that you think are the most important thing to do. So we have done that now 3 years in a row. We are still a young organization. And, the youth themselves, they are deciding 100% what kind of challenges of the democracy they want to define and what kind of democracy proposal they want to work out during conference. And the interesting thing is that there are 4 themes that are recurrent in all 3 conferences. So the first one is that they underline the need for global governance to tackle global problems. The second theme is the theme of economic inequality. They think that is a very recurrent problem that needs to be something done about. The third thing is about they want to see changes in education system, be it for supporting kids from less educated backgrounds, or be it for teaching people to live in a multicultural society. And the fourth theme is that they are saying that democratization and democracy improvement needs to start very, very locally. So they are proposing things of local participation and activation. So having said this, these are the 4 recurrent themes with varieties of specifications in the specific proposals. I think the interesting thing with youth, they are capable of at the same time defining challenges for democracy, which are really global. Economic inequality or a school curriculum, which is not really advancing critical thinking or thinking about multiculturalism. That is a truly valid, globally valid analysis of a challenge. But that is the analysis. Then they are uniquely, I think, qualified in saying that the solution, the proposal that they bring up, that must be local. So they kind of, the catchy phrase, think global, act local. I think that is not only a catchy phrase. Youth are extremely good in understanding that it's natural to zoom out when you have the problematization and define the problem. And you would see that this is a common problem for basically the entire globe, be it economic inequality or be it a school system which is not what it should be in a multicultural world. But at the same time, seeing that the way of handling this boils down to something very, very local. And for that matter, that is why we are so happy to be at this conference, because this conference is aimed for local change makers and not the least for mayors and helping mayors to run their cities. And we think, the IYTT thinks that if we would in the long term do something good for the future and for democracy, that would be by teaming up with local leaders so that our youth fellows could inspire the local leaders by the policy proposals for democracy promotion that they develop. And this is not only a thing that I have discovered as the co-founder and managing director. This is what the youth themselves are very convinced about. So I think that is the fine thing of combining local and global.
Agreed that it is a perfect occasion for us to meet here and inspire each other. And I think that it goes especially for the youngsters. I remember myself many years ago coming to my first conferences related to urbanism, and I was completely inspired. I was happy to be learning from all different people. Now I still perceive myself as a young person, so I'm of course still learning a lot by being here. And here I would like to ask about some advice for my listeners. Among them, there are many young people as well, and the youth especially as well. So what would be your advice to the young future leaders who would like to make an impact? First, of course, probably starting with the local level, but then spreading out to the global level as discussed.
This is a very important question. And actually, I have learned so much since the IYTT was started in 2019. And that is because, well, I had a vision for this organization together with my co-founder, but the vision it was not really set in stone. It was more about ground values and the main direction that we want to pursue. And that was a good thing because we have been learning so much underway. And that in itself is an advice that I nowadays give to our youth fellows when they embark upon something. I mean, be it a new educational program or be it an engagement in an NGO. I mean, the mindset, not thinking that everything that you embark on must be fully thought of or developed before you start your journeys, so to speak. But instead, start something and be ready to learn and be open to learn underway in a project, be it your personal educational project or be it an organization. So I think that is the first good advice. Another good advice, and that is also something that I have learned during the IYTT development, and that is, well, if you could strike a balance between, on the one hand, being truly radical, I mean, as a young person, progressive, I mean, offensive, I mean, not in the rude way, but radical. And you could strike a balance between that on the one hand, and on the other hand, understanding the established decision makers' need of your appreciation of how they make things come true. Then you could be successful. So put differently, please continue to be bold and what the decision makers would expect from a young person. Don't start to behave as you are an adult, because that is boring. And it will be boring for the established decision makers too. They want to have you as a spry, bold, and provocative person. But at the same time, understand the decision makers' requirements. So learn how the policy making is done and appreciate it. Don't question everything. Don't question, I mean, you could question procedures in policy making and institutionalized institutions in society. You could. But it would be at least as wise to acknowledge the procedures and institutions and be critical on the content. I mean, the policy content. I think that is the way of being a change maker, being a successful change maker, because if you acknowledge the system, if I may call it the system, the established power, if you acknowledge that, at the same time as you come up with bold and provocative suggestions, proposals on the content of things that the system produce, I think then it's harder for the established powerful decision makers to not take inspiration from what you are doing. So strike a balance in being an activist and being a well-behaved careerist. I think that's the thing. A balance between them that will give you the potential of being successful in making difference and contributing to a brighter future.
Especially one part resonated with me when you said that the kids or the youngsters, they shouldn't behave as adults because that's not the goal. I have heard very recently a very inspiring quote, and unfortunately I don't remember the author of it, but it was that the goal of youth or the goal of kids is not to become an adult, it's not to grow up, it's just to remain kid, because like that's when you shape yourself, your personality and you as a human, and you need to appreciate this stage a lot. Of course, you can become inspired by elderly or the older people or the grown-ups, but behave as you think you should behave and just keep this inner child in yourself as well. And speaking about that, and also about this, finishing on this inspirational note, how the youngsters, the youth, could be involved in the youth think tank. You mentioned the Congress already. Is that the only initiative, or there are more initiatives? And speaking about the Congress, when is the next edition, so that the people listening to this right now could be also part of this in the future?
Thank you for asking that. So the fourth International Youth Conference organized by the IYTT is on November 21st to 24th in Gothenburg, Sweden. And the call for the conference is about to open in the coming week. And it's to be found on the website. And we do, as we have done from the very start, namely asking up to 130 organizations in Europe that we have got to know if they wouldn't please very nicely spread the call. And hopefully they will do that, as they had done before. And of course, participants in the previous conference will spread the call. So as I said in the start of this talk, in this conversation, we receive on average 200 applicants and we select 24. So what I do, I respond to every individual sending in an application. First, when the application is sent in, and when we have selected, I send an individual personal comment to everyone who is not selected, and thanking that person for applying, acknowledging fine things in the application, and saying, why don't you stay tuned with us, meaning engage in what we call the IYTT Youth Panel, which is a sounding board for what we are doing in the think tank. Because the conference participants, the 24, when they have done the conference, they stay on as youth fellows, meaning that they would develop their policy proposals by engaging with researchers and with conference like this. And in that process, when they are refining the democracy promoting proposals, which they come up with during the conference, they also reach out to this panel. So the youth panel, which is, composed of applicants, they are contributing ideas and views to this process of bringing up policy proposals. So up till now, the panel consists of almost 140 people from more than 30 countries. So I think I'm so grateful because, many of them who applied may be disappointed that didn't make it to the conference, but that at least almost 1/3 or a little bit less than 1/3 still think it is productive to stay engaged in this panel. I think that is a very good thing. So that is the main thing. My main message is apply to the conference. And if you wouldn't make it as a conference participant, we will ask you to contribute in this panel. And also we will ask you if you want to have firsthand information about our events, because that is another way of engaging. We have many public events which are open to whoever, but it could be very advantageous if you have early information about such an event. So that I also send with in my personal response to every applicant. Please, if you want to be on the list of our special list, having early information of coming event, please put your name on that list. And that is a list with more than 200 persons. So that is the second way of staying engaged with the IYTT.
Urban, thank you for sharing the background and the story behind the youth think tank. And I hope that many listeners will be inspired and some of them will join the conference as well.
Thank you so much. It is an honor to come to the conference to start with, and it's an honor to come to you and have the chance to have a chat with you, and eventually to have the opportunity to share our experiences and the passion that we are working under, which gives us hope and strength and energy for the future, to share that with a broader audience. So I'm so grateful to have this chance, and I'm convinced that we will have a brighter future.